Attorneys always know they don't want to practice forever. They always know they don't want to practice forever. The question is, when does it become urgent? And in my experience, it becomes urgent when there is a life event, when there's a health event, when there's a financial hit that they take, and they realize that their current situation is not sustainable. That's what makes them realize, oh, wait, I need a succession plan, or I'm just going to retire, close my doors, and send all the business and all the relationships that I've developed over time to someone else. It's usually one of those sudden events that make attorneys suddenly realize that they need a succession plan. Panic, anxiety, inertia, they're experiencing fear. They have been doing something, usually the same basic things inside of their practice for 20, 30, 40 years, and they're approaching retirement. And then suddenly something happens and they realize that they don't really have a plan. And for attorneys, not having a plan is a problem. We are hardwired as lawyers to create strategies for other people, to create plans and to help them execute those plans. So when we are in that situation, it's not a fun experience for us. Attorneys are usually working on other people's problems. It's one of the main reasons we went to law school. We wanted to help other people. And over time, the constant helping other people becomes muscle memory. Everyone always knows the very common story of the shoemaker's shoes not having any shoes, right? Or the cobbler's shoes not having any shoes. Well, that is usually the case for lawyers. They're always helping other people. But when it comes to their own situation, their own urgency, their own cliff that's coming up, they don't wear shoes. And so that's what I see time and time again with clients who come into our doors. They walk in with anxiety about what's going to happen next, what's going to happen with their clients, who's going to take care of them. And oh, by the way, I've built something here. Am I really going to just close my doors and wash it away? And our goal is to help them convert that anxiety into confidence and clarity. Our goal is to help them walk in with a lot of assets that they've built and don't know what to do with, and transform it into freedom, transform it into value, not just for them, but for their clients and for the firm that can help them service those clients in the future. Well, it's incomplete, it's flawed, it's rushed. The attorney realizes that they don't have their documents organized, that they don't have records categorized correctly, that the financials are really optimized for their own tax needs, not for transition purposes. And so the window keeps getting smaller and smaller between the day they have this realization and the day that they want to retire. The smaller that window, the less optimal the planning, the less optimal the strategy, the less optimal the organization. And so they end up executing a very flawed strategy. The first giant misunderstanding that they have is that they don't have something worth selling or transitioning. They think that the business that they've built, that the assets that they've built and grown over time aren't really valuable. And so they don't process the strategy of, oh, wait a second, I've got something here that has a whole lot of value, a whole lot of goodwill and trust and brand recognition and relationship value. And that is definitely the case after 20, 30, 40 years of practice. So that's the first misconception. The second is, okay, now that I know that, what can I do with it? Well, the strategy and the process is sound. It's the same one that is used with mergers and acquisitions and recruiting and strategic revenue growth strategies all over the country for lots of different professionals. And a lot of those strategies are good strategies and some are not good. And what we do at ExitPath Partners is we have curated a really good optimal strategy to evaluate the assets and the infrastructure and the relationships and match that value to the optimal partner or successor, and then help the two meet and optimize that transition. The last most obvious misconception is the value of that practice. If someone checks the first two boxes and understands that they do have value and it can be transitioned, well, the emotion often leads to overvaluation at that point. Lawyers who are exiting and retiring often think that they're going to receive receive from a buyer a large check up front. In my experience, that doesn't typically happen unless there are those few cases where there is really great recurring revenue and subscription services and brand recognition and billboards and intellectual property and proprietary services inside that can be metabolized into repeatable, consistent, reliable, confident revenue by the buyer, even if the attorney exits. That is the unusual case, though. In most cases, it is a solo or small firm, and it is dependent on the relationships of one owner. And if that owner disappears after the transition, the clients will disappear too. And then there's always the question of whether the clients are going to stick around, even if the owner sticks around. Will the owner be willing to stick around for a period of time to make sure that trust is built and transition happens smoothly? Because of those uncertainties, a buyer typically will not write a very large check. A buyer will, in most cases, structure the acquisition or the transition as an earnout if it's an acquisition, or as a payout over 3 to 5 years under some sort of counsel relationship, where payments are made out of the proceeds of the transitioned book. Those are the three most common misconceptions that I've experienced working with exiting lawyers. So it's really simple. We are human beings. We have hundreds of thousands of years of cognitive biases have evolved with us as human beings, and those are confirmation biases. Those are emotional in nature. Once we have an understanding that there is a buyer who should want what we have built, then we start getting really emotional about it because we were there. We were the ones that have built this brick by brick, relationship by relationship, dollar by dollar for decades. And that creates an overconfidence sometimes, quite often, actually. And so it goes back to that question about wanting a large check up front, especially business lawyers who counsel businesses and entrepreneurs who have exited. Well, what does exit mean? It means you leave the business that you've started, you have a minimal transition period, and you get a big check up front. Typically with exiting professionals, professional services, businesses that are based primarily on relationships, that just isn't the case. The idea of a big check up front is more an emotional idea than a logical one. So I started my first business in high school and my first law firm about 14 years ago. And over the course of being an entrepreneur and building and owning and growing a law firm and other professional services firms, including brokerage firms and recruiting and other intermediary firms, I kept seeing the same pattern over and over again. And that is business owners and professionals leaving a lot of money and an opportunity on the table, leaving it on the table. They don't know that they have options. They don't know that there are capabilities that other intermediaries have that they don't have, reach that other intermediaries have that they don't have. And so being able to show retirees and exiting business owners that there are those options and there are those strategies led to us being able to help them. And that's how ExitPath Partners was born. The other part of it is the processes and the systems and strategies that ExitPath uses are ones that my team, have curated over time in our other brokerages. The strategies and the processes and the infrastructure that ExitPath Partners uses today to the success of its clients are ones that I've used at Gertzberg Licata, at our law firm, to grow our law firm. Same for our business brokerage and our recruiting companies. These are time-tested, curated, and evolved processes that at some point it became only natural to point that strategy at the profession that I know best, the legal profession. And that was the genesis of ExitPath Partners. The most obvious mistakes are not preparing early enough. It should be at least a year, ideally 3 to 5 years. At that point, they should be assembling a team. They don't typically do that. The team should involve an intermediary like a broker or an investment banker or even a recruiter, as well as a tax advisor, a really good insurance agent that will insure them for pre-closing or pre-retirement liabilities employees post-closing. They should be meeting with financial advisors, with retirement advisors, and that is the army that they should be assembling at least a year ahead of time. So delay is the biggest mistake. The second is just not having their files organized. An acquirer or a successor does not want to come in and see a giant mess of paper and of unfiled and uncategorized documents or financial records, a lot of unpaid receivables. Putting your document house and your financial house in order is a very common mistake, and it just devalues the opportunity. And then lastly, it's going it alone, which goes to the first mistake. You are a very skilled, most likely attorney, craftsman, artisan. In many cases, you are way better at doing that thing than you are at transitioning your firm, at being objective and having an expansive reach of opportunities. Trying to go it alone is a recipe, in my opinion, for subjectivity and for limiting your opportunities. They should understand early that the sooner you get your house in order, the better. Start planning at least a year out and ideally 3 to 5 years out. Start working with your advisory team, your tax person, your intermediary, your insurance person, your retirement planners. Start having those conversations again, at least a year out, but as early as possible, and build that roadmap. And also build your vision for your post-retirement life. Dan Sullivan taught me that every entrepreneur really focuses on freedom. It's why we became entrepreneurs. And specifically, it's the freedom of time, money, relationships, purpose, and health. Figure out post-retirement, post-exit, what you see yourself doing with your time. How are you working with your relationships? Which ones are the most important to you? What does your cash freedom look like? What does your health look like? And what are you doing to fulfill your internal purpose in life? Knowing that, painting that picture as clearly as possible, as early as possible, creates a pull from your present self into your future self and helps you build that strategy as you go. So it really is the first place we start when we work with our clients. Is number one, we figure out what there is, and then we figure out what here is. And not just here's what I think it is, it's what it actually is. And understanding our own blind sides and our own cognitive biases in order to build with crystal clarity the here and the there is really one of the most important reasons for working with an intermediary. And that's what we try to do at ExitPath. One is they start gaining confidence. Confidence is the entrepreneur's greatest skill. Another thing that Dan Sullivan taught me. You think differently, you show up differently, you strategize and plan differently when you are confident relative to when you are not confident. And as I mentioned, our clients walk in with anxiety, and our goal is to help them walk out with confidence and clarity. And so that's the first thing we notice is they start getting more confident. They start compartmentalizing what their future freedom looks like. That time, money, relationships, purpose, health freedoms. And they start to realize that they actually have built something that has a lot of value. It's value that needs to be curated and protected, but it is valuable. So those are the main things. And then they realize they've got work to do. They realize that the things that got you here won't get you there. What got you here is taking care of your clients first and foremost, and making sure that your business is such that clients will pay for your services. They are not built for transition. There's work to do there. Organizing your files, organizing your financial statements, and understanding a really good transition strategy. That's the work that has to get done. Next, the number one thing that makes a transition successful is culture fit, by which I mean the acquiring firm or the successor has to be culturally aligned with the exiting lawyer. If there is a culture clash, it ain't going to work. The exiting lawyer needs to have complete and total trust in the successor firm's people, because those people are going to be taking care of the exiting lawyer's clients, their most important relationships. That trust goes into that culture fit. Does the acquiring firm have lawyers that are top notch? Not just competent, but excellent at what they do. If not, then those clients are going to walk and find other lawyers. Next, you have to have a really good plan. You have to have a really good strategy for the transition. That includes not just documents moving over and files moving over, but the relationship moving over. There has to be a really intentional process that starts even before the match is made, the introduction is made with the top clients of the exiting lawyer's firm to get them ready to transition. And that really means getting them to trust the retiring lawyer, the exiting lawyer, and getting them ready to trust the acquiring firm. So at some point, that turns into warm introductions to the lawyers who will be servicing those clients in the future. The retiring or exiting lawyer must stay involved for a period of time. It could be 6 months, it could be a year, it could be multiple years. And a lot of that depends also on what the retiring lawyer wants to do. If the retiring or exiting lawyer wants to just make rain, and we've got clients that want to continue to do some amount of work, some amount of mentoring, some high level strategy, and others want to play golf with their clients and have lunch and just maintain the relationships that way. But involvement is required or this will not work. And then the other thing that makes a transition successful is organization. Having financials, documents, records in really well organized compartments and files, and ideally digitized. Paper is really a non-starter for most acquiring firms. Why do advisors often struggle when helping attorney clients transition? Number one, because they're not attorneys. Attorneys understand other attorneys better than non-attorneys do. That's a fact. That's a fact. We are not your average professional. In many cases, we are argumentative. We have egos. We are highly strategic. We are storytellers. We tell ourselves stories. We tell our clients stories. Attorneys are the profession among all other professions, in my experience, that have the most confirmation bias. Why? Because we are natural storytellers and strategists, and we pull data in that is generally selective. Meaning, especially for litigators, we have great capability of elevating confirming data and devaluing disconfirming data. That is the definition of confirmation bias. And so one way that advisors often struggle when helping attorneys transition is they're not attorneys. It also generally takes an attorney to understand the nuances of the legal profession. IOLTA is an attorney-only concept, trust accounts, and certainly understanding the playing field. Generally, an attorney intermediary understands who the potential successors are and what they're looking for more than a typical business broker or investment banker or other intermediary. So those are the reasons that advisors often struggle when helping attorney clients transition. I guess I'll add a little bit more to that. In the first conversation, we are really zooming in on what is here and what is there, not the here and the there that the exiting lawyer thinks exist, but the ones that actually exist, especially here in reality. How realistic is the there relative to the here? So we start there. We start with identifying those two endpoints, the timelines, the expectations, the freedoms that everyone's looking for. And then we identify the obstacles getting in the way, the opportunities that are on the table and not being exploited and discovered and excavated and worked. And then what are the superpowers? What are the strengths? Our job to build the strategy to get the exiting lawyer from here to there is understand those 2 points in time, and then eliminate the obstacles or minimize them, exploit the opportunities, and leverage the superpowers. Those 5 data points build the strategy. That is what we understand in meeting number 1. Reach out now to your team. That is your intermediary, your tax advisor, your insurance agent, your CPA, and eventually your deal lawyer, the one who's going to be advising you on the closing documents, the purchase agreement, the of counsel agreement. At some point, getting them involved and advising you on what the negotiation ought to look like, what that letter of intent ought to look like, getting your team organized, again, minimum 1 year out, ideally 3 to 5 years. The lawyers who are looking at an exit within 1 to 5 years should start putting that team together and reach out to that team now. If any of this resonates with you, if you are looking for advice, for strategy, for a conversation about what your here and there looks like and what the strategy ought to be to get you from here to there, below this is our contact information. There's a link that you should click on that will start this process. I look forward to talking with you.